Because if all of your happiness is wrapped up in this one thing and that one thing goes away, you are stuck. Thank you for joining me here on Tailgate Chat once again. I truly appreciate your support and your willingness to keep coming back and listen to me talk about things that I've had to deal with, and I hope that somebody else is able to pick up some little nuggets to help with their journey. You know, last week we talked about core values and the importance of it, and we're going to get that. You're going to see here in a little bit where that ties into today, because today we're going to talk about transition. Transition isn't really about changing jobs or leaving the military or retiring or having some other, major life change. What transition really is what happens when the identity you've created for yourself no longer matches the season of life you're in. Let me put it another way. When purpose is deeper than your job, your title, or the season of life you're in, navigating the transition becomes much easier. Like the great Ferris Bueller once said, life goes by pretty fast. Sometimes you have to stop and look around, or you might just miss it. Let's get after it. So a lot of people think that transition just strictly means, I'm going from point A to point B. That's what I used to think, right? I transitioned out of the military. I transitioned from this job to that job. It's just, going from one stage to the next, right? And sometimes it's super easy, and sometimes it's not. And I'll tell you though, transition is universal, and it's not just something that a super or a subset of people are going to go through. It's not just something that military members are going to go through when they leave the military, although I'll tell you, it's a pretty big transition. I mean, they spend anywhere from 8 to 13 weeks training you not to act like a civilian, and then they give you about 48 hours worth of TAPS training to go from being what they trained you to be to now being a civilian. Again, it doesn't really match up. It's two different worlds. And so that transition for a lot of people is very difficult. But at the end of the day, transition, you'll find it in a lot of different areas of life too. If you're, going from one company to another, there's a transition in there. If you're going from one type of role to another, right? You're going from working to being retired. You're going from being an entrepreneur to now you got to go back to work for somebody else because your company failed. There's a lot of different transitions out there, and it's universal, and it's not just for certain people. And the details change, right? Your title changes, where your paycheck comes from changes, where you live may change, but the feeling of having this transition does not. I've been through it from both being a military member to being a civilian. I've done it from working from this company to that company, done it from being in this type of role to this type of role. The feelings are the same. So I think this really isn't just about a talk for military transition. It fits wholeheartedly. And in some cases, because of my experience, that may resonate more with others who are going through that same thing. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you're transitioning from and to. And we'll get into that here in a little bit. Because I think one of the things is we confuse what we do with who we are. And I think that's where the difficulty of transition comes from. We confuse who we are with what we do. And a lot of people will ask, tell me who you are. And they'll say, well, I'm an engineer. Well, that's what you do. It's not who you are, right? When you tie those together, this is why, so example, I've used the title Marine. I still do, as a matter of fact. I've had the title Executive Director. I've had the title Entrepreneur. I've had the title Chairman of the Board. I've had several titles, but they were a role, not who I was. Now, I'll tell you, I look back on it now, And I can say those were roles. Those were not who I was. They were not my identity. With the Marine one, that was my identity. And I still rely on that one a little bit, but it wasn't solely, who I was as an individual. Those are roles. And a lot of people will say, so who are you? You're a CEO, or you're a doctor, or you're this or that, right? Those are roles. Those are not who you are. And this is why we talked about last week. And if you haven't seen it, go back and watch last week's episode on core values. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out what to do with our lives or who we're supposed to be in this world. But we really need to spend more time understanding who we are first. And that lies into this. If you don't spend the time, if you don't know your core values, you don't know who you are. If you don't know who you are when a transition comes, you are going to be lost. I know this firsthand. It's happened to me on more than one occasion. Sometimes it spanned years with me not understanding it or realizing it. Sometimes I knew it right away and I was down in the dark valley. We need to understand who we are. We need to develop, understand what our core values are, and understand who we are. Because if we know that, if we know down at our core who we are, when the transition comes, it won't be as hard because we are not tying our identity to that role. We're tying it to our core values. And the hardest part, is it. When a transition comes, the hardest part is not losing the job. I mean, it's tricky and it's tough. Don't get me wrong. But the hardest part is understanding, because if we've tied our identity to that role, if we have tied our identity to that role, the transition is going to be much harder, and it has nothing to do with the job. It has to do with our identity. You can, you take your uniform off, the mission's gone, the schedules are gone, the team is gone, the accountability is gone. But if you know who you are, you can make it past all that. And this is where I talked about in the past as well at other episodes, creating that SOP for yourself so that you can create consistency. And the consistency will help continue you forward instead of just, falling flat down and not knowing what to do next. Nobody wants to feel like Ricky Bobby and not know what to do with their hands. We need to have a structure in place that will help keep us moving forward. And if we have our identity understood, it makes that whole process easier. And I'll give you a story. I've talked about this before, when I left the Marine Corps, the transition at the time wasn't really hard. It didn't seem hard, right? I was newlywed and in a new town with new people and apartment, and life was going well, but something was missing, right? There was this hole and something was missing. And as I've talked about, I went from job to job to job to job, 9 jobs, 9 different companies, 9 different industries in 7 years. Was constantly jumping. There was something that was missing. Well, what was missing is what I just talked about. I took the uniform off and I hung my identity up in the closet when I took it off. I didn't know who I was. I had no sense of purpose anymore working in corporate America. Now, I will tell you that fast forward several years, and when I was running nonprofits, or working with nonprofits, my wife and I, we started one that had to deal with helping parents and families understand drug abuse and drug problems. We started another one with another guy that was more politically oriented. We had the nonprofit, the veterans nonprofit. I was working with the VFW. I was a member of the VFW, and was very active as the post adjutant, the junior vice commander, the senior vice commander. I was very active in the VFW. Was also part of the Walk of Honor. Our town had built a Walk of Honor and was building a Walk of Honor, and I was part of that committee to build that memorial site at a city park. I was also part of the Veterans Advisory Committee for our town. So I had 9 different things going on. Not to mention I had 2 sons that were in sports and a wife and a family. My purpose was tied to that veteran stuff. And when I had a job that I went into work one day and my boss said, I'm going to have to let you go. I mean, I wasn't happy that my job just went away, but I wasn't crushed because I had my purpose over here. My identity was helping veterans who were coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan and doing things for the Vietnam era veterans and doing things in our community that uplifted patriotism and uplifted veterans and put a spotlight on the greatness that veterans were doing in North Texas. That was my purpose. The job was a paycheck. Let's move right on to the next one. Wife and I started, and this is what I talked about last week, Prisma. That was the launching off point of our staffing agency. Tying back to core values, right? And so the one thing I have found when I did not have that sense of purpose, there is a vacuum. There is an emotional vacuum that is created if you do not have something when you tied your identity to your purpose. Another example. I was running the Veterans Nonprofit. It became my full-time job. I was the executive director of this organization. I was responsible for the 7, 8, 9 employees that we had and the 100+ veterans that had gone through our program and the other veterans that were going through our other programs. I mean, we were tied. We had a 7,000 square foot facility. We had a veteran business center. We were tied to local universities, and we had partnerships with companies, and we were doing great things. And my identity was tied. That's who I was. That's what I was supposed to be doing. I knew it way down in this area down here, that helping veterans and being that as my job, not just kind of like what I did on the side. That was my career. That was my life. That was my identity, was helping veterans and working for veteran service organizations. I was on 7 days a week. I was constantly just involved in that area. I was involved in that realm here in DFW. And when the funding dried up and that organization closed, all of that went away. And with it, my identity went right out the window. And that was a huge vacuum that needed to be filled, and it got filled with depression. And so I'm here to tell you, speaking from experience, having a purpose, having an identity, having that set of core values, all of those things I've had them, but I tied them all together in one ball. And when the ball went out the window, I was like, it's like going down the road at 70 miles an hour and the dog jumps out the window. That was me, just free falling. So I will tell you that from personal experience, I have pieced all this together as kind of my after action review, which we've talked about on here as well, making sure every once in a while you're doing an AAR and making sure you're on the right path, grab the compass, grab the map, take a look around, course correct if you need to. That is my words of, I don't want to say wisdom because I don't have wisdom, is my advice to you. Understand who you are. If your identity is tied to your job or your career, I would highly suggest that you find a way, because if something happens and that career or that job goes away, there's a very good chance you're going to be in a spot where you don't know what to do next because your identity was just lost. I'm not saying throw your love out the window and go do something else. I'm just saying you need to be made aware. You need to have some cognitive ability in this area to understand these are the things that can and could, probably will happen at some point down the road. I think having talked to some individuals who have retired, the ones who have it easy, the ones who are loving retired life, are those ones that had an identity that was not tied to their job. And when their career, they put that, that little wax stamp on that envelope that has their career, they still had this other thing over here. I got a neighbor who lives 2 doors down. He's out in his garage. He's got a buttload of woodworking gear. He's always out there working on wood, building different things and loving it, right? That's his identity. That's his passion. It had nothing to do with his career. And he's loving life. I've also seen people who did not have that other thing. And at 80 years old, they don't know what to do with themselves. And they're going back and they're working or doing some other thing because they just can't sit still because they don't have that other thing. And they feel lost. And they're like, I've worked, for the last, 60, 70 years. What am I going to do now? Well, if you have another thing, you've identified who you are at your core. You know your core values. You understand your purpose. You have identity that's tied to something that's greater than yourself. That's the key. And the mistake in this is believing that you have to reinvent yourself. I thought about that for a while. I've seen other people like, well, this job ended, I don't know what to do next, and now they try to reinvent themselves. You don't have to if you've tied your identity outside, if your identity and is outside of your career or your title or your uniform. If you have that, when a transition comes, it's just like it's like a relay runner handing the baton to the final leg of the race. One stage is building you, one season of life is building you up and getting you to this point, but seasons change. We have different moments in life, different seasons, and it's just handing the baton from one season to the next, and you just keep right on going. I don't know if what I'm saying is coming through like I'm hoping it is. I don't know if it's making any sense. I really hope that my rambling is coming through like I hope it is, because it just I wish I would have had these thoughts about a decade ago. I wish that somebody could have sat down and told me, hey, don't be so aligned with what your career is. Find something outside to help with your identity. Your identity can be your job, but you have to have something else to fall back on. You have to have something else that you're passionate about. You have to have something else that you do that creates happiness, because if all of your happiness is wrapped up in this one thing and that one thing goes away, you are stuck. And as you're going through this, and if you're noodling this around and you're like, well, what else is there? What do I do? I'm going to just throw this out there. I've talked about this as well. It seems like I'm doing a lot of repeating, doesn't it? Well, I'm just trying to drive these ideas home, is that you have to take action. That once you start to identify these things, you can't just sit around and noodle it and do some more research. Action first. You have to take action. And when it's really hard, if you don't do it when you're not in a bad spot, when you are in a bad spot, or you are not where you think you need to be, and now you try to create action, that's where the problems come, because you are now trying to create action under friction. And that's okay. There's a way around that. Creating action under friction will help you move forward. And part of that is you have to understand that you can't wait for clarity. Clarity comes after movement. Clarity will come as you start moving forward. If you sit around and wait for the light bulb and the aha moment, you could be sitting for a while. I did that. I got super comfortable. I was just waiting, for that thing to happen to kick me off and get me moving, get me spurred up. And it didn't happen. It wasn't until I just said, the hell with it, and I just started moving forward. I'd heard it enough from people, and now I'm preaching what I had learned. Just start moving forward. The clarity will come. I wouldn't be sitting here filming this episode this many months later of this podcast, sitting on this tailgate, if I hadn't moved forward that one day. I would probably still be sitting there. I actually have this thought. It's written, and it's a note, a sticky note that is on my computer. It says, am I waiting or am I acting? And when I find myself grabbing my phone or doing something else at work, and I put it on my monitor so I can see it, so that I can just keep moving forward, because I have found that I will find some way or another to procrastinate and find and make something else more important than the priority when it's really not. And it's because I'm waiting, because I'm fearful of one thing or another. And if you want to learn more about fear, go back a couple of episodes. I talk about that quite a bit. I hope that everything I'm talking about today is resonating and is making sense. It's something I'm pretty passionate about, as you can probably tell, and it's because I have lived it. And it's through the grace of God that I'm sitting here today able to do this. And with that being said, we're going to just take a moment, as we normally do, and we're going to say, Heavenly Father, thank you for giving us the opportunity here today to sit on this tailgate and to talk to the individuals who are watching. Father, I know that this is your message, and so I rely on you, Father, to give me the guidance, to give me the strength, and to give me the wisdom as we talk about these topics. And Father, I pray that there's somebody out there, I pray that the person out there who's going through a transition problem, whether it's a military member, whether it's an executive, whether it's a parent whose child is left home, I pray that you are able to put onto their heart and help them understand that those are roles that they are working, and that it is not their identity, and that you help them understand and find their identity and move from one season of life to the next and make that transition easier. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So once again, I just want to say thank you for taking some time to sit here with us on the tailgate today. I hope that this was beneficial to you. I truly appreciate it. If you have a transition story, if you have something that has been a light bulb moment for you, or this was a time in my life that I needed something like this, or if you're in it now, just leave a comment down below. I'd love to respond. I'd love to begin that conversation with you. Give it a like, and subscribe. Click the subscribe button, because there's going to be more of these coming out, and we're about to go into some pretty cool places. We're about to do some pretty cool stuff. So hopefully you'll subscribe and you'll get those notifications when those new episodes come out. Until we see you here on the tailgate once again, this has been Tailgate Chat, where we're feeling your purpose and driving your fire. Let's get after it.